In this video, I will attempt to cover the generals who are, in my opinion, the best and most genius of all time. There will likely be ones I may forget about or miss, so if you feel that there are any who have been unjustly disregarded by my cruel judgment, feel free to point them out in the comments section. I will base my judgment in this video not necessarily on the generals' long-term success, but rather on the genius they showed during their lifetime. The reason for this is that if I based it on success, many generals who had the perfect situation for their rise would make it onto the list, and many generals who were very able, but who had events out of their control go poorly for them, would not make it onto this list. With all of this said, I will now begin. At number 10, I chose Montgomery. Montgomery was a great British commander who took charge of the desert campaign against Erwin Rommel when it was in a dire situation. He was able to change the tide not just of the desert campaign, but also of the Second World War, with Churchill famously saying that before El Alamein, which was his crucial and decisive battle, the British were never winning, but afterwards they never lost. At the Battle of El Alamein, he defeated Rommel's forces, which was especially impressive given that Rommel was a military genius in his own right. Taking the place of number 9, I chose Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, better known as Saladin. He was a genius military leader who was able to halt the Christian attempt to protect the Kingdom of Jerusalem before expelling the Crusaders from his lands. He was a genius military leader who won many battles, even when he was fighting all the armies of Christendom. The only reason he is not higher up on this list is because he was defeated in a few battles by Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, despite the fact Baldwin was facing the terrible disadvantage of a leper, and as such was struggling to maintain control of his own kingdom. Carving out a place at number 8 is Pyrrhus of Epirus, who was one of the few generals to defeat the Romans in many battles, never once being defeated by them. Although his strategic thought and battle plans for single battles were amazing, he suffered from an inability to transfer these stunning victories into real conquests of enemy territory. He inspired the term Pyrrhic victory, which meant a victory which was so costly that it was barely worth a victory. Now, for number 7, a far lesser known general, Jan Žižka from Czechia. You may not have heard of him, but he was a military genius. He campaigned with a poorly armed and trained force against many of the kings who ruled the kingdoms around Czechia. Despite all of his disadvantages against him, he won stunning battle after stunning battle, despite not having a kingdom to levy from. He never once lost a battle and pioneered new strategies, such as making strong forts out of supply wagons, using his men's makeshift spears to defeat lethal cavalry and infantry charges alike. Reconquering number 6 is Maorian. He was a great Western Roman emperor who wrestled with barbarian tribes for Gaul, throwing them off and retaking most of the Western Roman Empire. Before he could finish, however, he was assassinated by his own officials. If he had lived longer, he may have restored the whole Western Roman Empire, sending it into a new Pax Romana. But due to a terrible betrayal of his own people, his hopes were thwarted along with those of his empire, which would die only a few decades later. For number 5 is Belisarius. He would avenge the destruction of the Western Empire by throwing the barbarians out of the majority of its previous heartlands. He also engaged against campaigns against the Sassanid Persians, winning the first Roman victory against the Sassanids in over 100 years. Seizing number 4 is Alexander the Great. He destroyed the Persian Empire, which was the first power of the world then, and carved out his own Hellenic Empire in its former lands. He used advanced strategies to win battles against numerically far superior foes, and had he lost even one battle, he would have been undone. Yet he did not, and all Persia was his. Now for number 3 is Khalid ibn al-Walid. He defeated the Eastern Romans and Sassanid Persians alike, humiliating the two great powers, setting the Persians into terminal decline and taking the Romans from a world power to a regional one. His genius strategies are studied in military schools all around the globe even today, and it was as a result of him that the Islamic Caliphate would conquer much of its land. Now getting close to the end, Number 2 is Charles XII of Sweden. He was 15 when he came to power and faced a coalition of 3 of the great powers of the region: the Danes, the Polish-Lithuanians, and the Russians. In sweeping campaigns, he annihilated the Danes and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealths alike, before wreaking havoc upon the Russians, only finally narrowly being defeated at the Battle of Poltava. Although he would eventually be defeated, for many years he would win against overwhelming odds, despite being very young. He was so shockingly good that many centuries later he inspired his own Sabaton song, Carolus Rex. Before I say first place, I will give a list of the great generals who didn't quite make it onto the list. These were Che Guevara, the great Cuban guerrilla fighter; Genghis Khan, founder of the great Mongol Empire; Lawrence of Arabia, British officer who won a guerrilla campaign against the Ottomans; Hannibal, enemy of Rome; and finally Thomiris, a Scythian queen and killer of Cyrus the Great, founder of Persia. Finally now, in first place, the best general of all time, at least according to me, is Napoleon. He faced almost all of Europe and used great strategies such as the defeat in detail to destroy his foes. His strategies and battles are still taught in almost all military schools, and it would take much time for Europe to defeat him, despite the fact that he was facing terrible odds in every war he fought. With the many victories he accumulated, he was an obvious choice for first place. This has been our video on the best generals of history. There will be more videos coming very soon. For now, Valete et Ave SPQR!